Our third speaker today earned his doctorate in genetics, molecular and cellular biology in 2010. Eric Schulze has served as a thought leader and speechwriter for organizations including NASA, SpaceX, the Smithsonian, the National Academy of Sciences, and is currently Science and Creativity Advisor to WNBC's Peabody Award-winning radio show and podcast, Studio 360. Eric has developed creative content for several STEM communities, including the Emmy Award-winning television show Through the Wormhole with Morgan Freeman. He is the founding host of the Webby-nominated online show Ask Smithsonian for the Smithsonian Institution, which is seen in over 30,000 schools nationwide. Please join me in welcoming Eric.
Howdy, 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 howdy. Thank you. I'm actually going to raise this because I'm kind of tall. They told me this goes up. Awesome. Sorry, people behind me. Okay. And let's load the presentation. Technology, this is why we need steam. There we go. Okay. So the modern world was invented by Pablo Picasso. Not entirely, mind you, but certainly in part. You see, a young scientist searching for the answer to a vexing problem, the story goes, happens across the emerging work of a brash new artist named Pablo Picasso. No, not that Pablo. This one. You see, that scientist had a problem, a vexing problem, a problem with light. You see, light seemed to be schizophrenic. When watched carefully, light seemed to act like a particle, a sort of a thing, a photonic bullet. At other times, the light behaved like a wave, a sort of thing-like thing. And so nothing could seem to resolve this sort of paradox. So the scientist iterated, talked to his friends, and they collaborated, and they concluded that light is weird. And then came Pablo Picasso. And Picasso, like our scientist, had a problem. How best to represent the three-dimensional world in which we live on a two-dimensional surface like a painting canvas? How also to best reduce the detail of the world until it's recognizable, like just reduced into its essential parts? And after a fortuitous visit and discussion with his friends, he visited the Paris Museum, and they were doing this exhibition on early African tribal masks, and he had an aha moment. He would paint all of the surfaces at the same time, like a magical 360-degree camera image flattened onto the surface, while simultaneously reducing and simplifying the lines of the image like this. He could distort others, and eventually Cubism evolved. Our scientist, years later, saw one of these and was sort of struck by this sort of discovery in so many of these paintings. And he noticed that he'd seen everything at once. And so he was thinking about it. He realized that reality itself was the same thing. Light could be this sort of wave and particle. What we scientists were seeing had been different views of light, like seeing it through the top or through foggy glasses. It all sort of depends on how we view it. In the name of our intrepid scientist, Niels Bohr, Nobel laureate, father of the quantum world, and arguably one of the humans that ushered in the modern world as we know it. From computers to iPhones to modern medical technology, Bohr's ideas helped invent it all, and due in part to the illumination provided by Pablo Picasso. Thank you all for being here today. It's an honor to be speaking to you all in the round. This is kind of a nerd geek dream of mine. I'm Eric. I'm a maker of things. I'm a scientist, a TV show host, and I really dig this whole STEM and STEAM thing, and that's what I want to talk about today, because I started out as an artist and ended up as a scientist, thanks large in part to this man right here. I'm here to talk about a world that needs to be made, not by me, but by you. Who here makes stuff? Who here wants to make stuff? Yes. So if you do, that might make you an artist. but it also might make you a scientist. You see, like Picasso and Bohr before us, they both showed us that this world is sort of two sides of the same lifestyle, artist and scientist. We may just need a better view to determine the answer. And the arts and humanities are essential to a productive STEM society. So if you look back into history, we see a nice pattern. Without the arts, the sciences cannot flourish. Why? Well, it's complicated, but at its core, society is stable and rich enough to have communities devoted to producing creative products as commerce, like selling paintings for their beauty alone, often have the resources and time able to put into STEM communities as well. So it might surprise you to find out, ironically, the sciences have until recently been sort of a luxury compared to the arts. And more importantly, no society that has ever said, hey, artists, go get a real job, and shook their fist from their lawn, has ever had a stable scientific industry. Even simpler, no art, no science, never the other way around. But is this the correct viewpoint? If art and science are one and the same, is order that important? Because if we look at the data, if we look at the science, if we invest $1 into stuff made with STEM, we make $4 and change at the other end. If we do that with the arts, you put that dollar in, you get 81 cents. But is that telling the full story? Because if you look at the data even further, STEM tends to reinvest in itself, which shows a larger return on investment. The arts, by definition, cares about everything but itself. It's the supporter, so it invests everywhere but itself. So I want to emphasize that value is not just about money. It's about what science can tell us about STEAM, for example. STEAM makers of things and ideas also suffer from sort of one upper limit from their craft: taste. Taste is sort of the newest frontier scientifically. Taste is poorly defined, but it could be considered sort of the application of ideas in time. If ideas are the fuel, taste is the gas pedal. Taste is in many ways a question of rate and not things. The iPhone could have been invented by Neanderthals, but they were probably smarter than us, but despite the fact that they had a 100,000-year head start on us, they were spending too much time trying to figure out how to fight the common cold and perfecting their immune systems rather than inventing things like agriculture, cities, and all of modern humanity. They weren't fast enough, and it wasn't the right time. And this is sort of where the right time comes in. You see, the curation of ideas can be thought of as a speed limit sign on taste. It is the cultural and temporal limits and acceptance that we as groups and individuals decide on what we want to use, see, or experience, or not. And neither concept has been measured really well, and that's okay. No one thought we could ever measure, no one thought we could ever measure ideas scientifically. But we figured that out with things like the Nobel Prize. So with all this art and science, how do we get STEM to be pronounced as STEAM? Well, science itself is counterintuitive. What makes sense is not often reality. So in this way, I would offer some science, if I can. Measure yourself. Quantifying your efforts as creators of stuff is a great way to get yourself noticed, first and foremost. So, number one, measure everything you do, try to do, and fail to do. Because remember, if you do not measure it, it does not exist. So you gotta make stuff. Like any good artist knows, it must be available for criticism. Great science and great art must exist outside of your head and in reality. So how does science say we even get to ideas? What is the scientific process of creating ideas? Well, here it is. Ideation, elaboration, implementation, and curation. Now let's turn that into English. Create ideas, make a lot more ideas, choose one and do it, and put it into the world. Number two, create new fields. You can do this all right now, all of you. You don't need to be at Albert Einstein or Marie Curie to create a new field. See, really creative people rewrite the questions that they've been asked. So write a question and answer it. Get a few people together, answer that question, write it down, test it. Boom, you've created a new field. Three, become the gravedigger to dead information. Eminently creative people who have changed the world all seem to have this one thing in common. They actively render information obsolete. They say this information is no longer valid or useful, and they throw it in the trash. The rate-limiting step in producing taste or the curation of ideas and information is not in producing lots of stuff. That matters. Don't get me wrong. No, it's how much stuff you're willing to say is no longer useful or valid, and you get rid of it. So interestingly, the internet prevents a lot of this. If you want to justify a position, the internet's nooks and crannies will hide it. A simple Google search can justify almost any opinion these days. So, tell the world. In general, whether it be science, history, or makers, you have to communicate what you do and the value of it, not only within your field, but to other fields and the population in general. There's a couple of ways you can do this. I do it for a living. It's very difficult sometimes, but it's totally worth it. I've put together this very scientific Venn diagram, which you all can copy. There's the three main roles in which you can play: advocate, ambassador, and elected representative. And you can see the sort of intersection of these abilities, training distinguish them. As an example, the advocate is the human that speaks from the inside of the field. They're the ones doing the work, and she is what I will call the maker communicator. The ambassador is that human that speaks from the high five, outside of the field, but loves it just as much and is there to work with you. And she is what I'll call the makest communicator. And then you have the elected representatives, the people that you send off to represent your interests to people who do not necessarily share your viewpoints. And at the center is the artist communicator, this professional that can play all of these roles at any given moment, and she is a unicorn, and you want that person in your community at all times. So in this way, you help yourself and your creative communities. And because creativity is not created in a cultural vacuum, it's very communal. Your individual creativity is measured in the strength of your community. I want to emphasize this. You are not creative. Your communities are. Science tells us that it's better to think of creativity this way. You are the helper that makes the community's work a little easier, and you creating ideas and new flavors of ideas. You are the advocates, the ambassadors, and the artists. Your teachers, your friends, your parents, your spouses, they are your helpers. They're to help reduce the amount of work that you spend reinventing the wheel, guiding you along the way. And speaking of success to all of you will almost always look like a mess, a hot mess, an ever-changing suite of imposter syndrome, where you will think everyone around you will know that you're faking it somehow. And if you feel that way, that you're faking it, you're doing it right. Because when you step out into the cosmos and you look for that new viewpoint, that way of seeing everything at once, you're going to have to invent a new thing or idea to do it. Whether it be a new piece of tech, a new color, a new way of thinking, heck, even a new community. And some people will criticize you for this. And I say, good. Because that's what your community's for, to support you. And you will not know how to do things right the first 42 times that you try it. But that's okay, because you need to create your community first, because that's where your creativity lies. So go create your community first, create stuff second. Supporting the maker community is really important. It helps us in the sense that it unlocks new ways of perceiving reality. And it's only possible if we leverage the arts as equal opportunity and equal partners in the pursuit of rational inquiry and knowledge that this will work. So I'll leave you with this. It is not an A. It is a rocket ship to new knowledge and opportunities. Thank you for being curious.